Muscular weaknesses will hurt your strength development in a variety of compound movements while not yielding the most aesthetic look. So in this video, I'll teach you exactly how to identify and correct these problems once and for all. So starting with the obvious, all you have to do is look in the mirror. Usually, you'll tell right away if one area is much larger than the other. For example, maybe your triceps are very small, but your pecs and delts are huge. So whenever you go do a close grip bench, you're way weaker than you should be. Or what if your triceps and delts are massive, but your pecs are tiny, and now you have an amazing incline bench, amazing overhead press, but flat bench never seems to move up? Well, now you know the chest is the weakness because it corresponds. When you're a real natural, the size you have in certain areas will greatly affect your performance. Like you can have the triceps of a 300-pound bencher, but maybe the pecs of a 250-pound bencher, and that will definitely affect your performance on the compound movements. So look at the ratio, assess things from a bodybuilding perspective, even if you're a strength athlete. And the same thing could be said for wearing clothes. Maybe your pants are super tight around the quads, but then your ass is just floating, despite having the belt adjustment and all that. Or when you wear a t-shirt, it's super snug around the arms, but you're just floating around the torso, even though it's slim fit. Now you know back might be an issue. Or maybe you look in the mirror and you have no spinal erectors whatsoever. Coincidentally, your deadlift is weak. Just look in the mirror and that'll tell you the entire story. Just one glance, you can usually tell also what type of strength athlete the person is, just by looking at their physique. Now the second thing you have to look at is movement breakdown on compound movements. For example, let's say you've mastered the form already and you're an advanced lifter, and you notice that when you get fatigued, your upper back begins to collapse during deadlifts, or your lower back starts to round, or maybe your grip gives out and you have to use straps. The fact that those muscle groups gave out, which led to a form breakdown, pretty much identifies that weakness on the spot. Like you'll see the breakdown. I'm not talking about doing a 1-rep max and the rep is just slow all the way through. No, I mean you're doing rep work and you notice that certain areas get super fatigued much faster than they should be. Like I think Louis Simmons was the one who said that you can have 600-pound glutes and hamstrings, but a 400-pound lower back. So it makes sense from that perspective. And maybe you could feel certain muscles working harder than others. Like when you do a bench press, maybe all you feel is your triceps and your pecs are never like getting a pump or anything. That tells you some things. So always look at where the exercise starts to get very difficult when you're doing rep work specifically. So next thing you have to look at is the variations you're performing, the differences between those two. For example, let's say you magically have a stronger reverse curl than supinated curl. Well, maybe that tells you that your biceps are lagging like crazy compared to your forearms. I know it's an exaggerated example, but it does highlight my point. Or let's say you're super weak at floor pressing or benching with chains. Well, maybe that tells you that your triceps are lagging. So that's an easy way to view it right there. Not just one exercise, but all the variations. And the strength difference will tell you what needs to be worked on. And then the final thing you got to look at is the isolation strength. So let's say you have a 350 close grip bench, but you can't even do skull crushes at 135. That tells me right then and there that your triceps are most definitely a lagging area because your extension strength should be much stronger in that case. It means that you've been compensating by having stronger delts and pecs. So the easy fix would obviously be to do a lot more extensions, up the volume on those, and just emphasizing presses that use more overloads, like bands and chains and stuff like that, even the Swiss bar with a close grip. So what I'm saying is that if your isolation to compound strength is extremely distorted, that tells you what needs to be focused on. And like I said, the triceps is a perfect example of this. What about your deadlifts? What if your lower back strength is extremely weak, but you got amazing glutes and hamstrings? Well, now you know you got up the lower back volume. So look at the isolation strength or just the accessories. Maybe it's not going to be 100% isolation. Perhaps there's a little bit of other muscle groups coming into play, but they're not the main drivers. So look at the primary movers specifically. If you notice that there's a big difference between those mini accessory exercises and the compounds, like you can see it, like this is not fucking normal. Maybe your friend who benches 250 has the same extension strength as you, despite you being in the 300s. You know that's something that has to be worked upon, okay? So those are the main methods of assessing muscular weaknesses. Some of it is common sense, other things a little bit more iffy. Now, I want to tell you how to correct these problems, which is actually very simple to do. So the main thing I would tell you is to perform the exercises you suck at. Bottom line, that's the greatest thing you can do. Because if you raise performance on those movements that you're just terrible at, you'll notice carryover to your standard compound movements, which means what? Greater numbers, greater volume accumulation over time. So that will inevitably and get you bigger right off the bat. So you're correcting your weakness in that way. And you'll know what those lifts are if you run a maximized program. That's why concurrent periodization is extremely valuable. Because you're rotating movements on a frequent basis, you get to see what you suck at. You get to see what the ratio is between certain movements. Like I know for myself that my incline bench and floor press are weak as fuck compared to my dead bench, touch and go, pause, etc. I know that for a fact, which means if I brought up those exercises, I would get carryover while fixing a lot of the weaknesses. Be the same for you. Maybe you're good at all the squats except the front squat and the Zercher squat. That might tell you that you need more upper back. That might tell you that your quads are lagging a little bit. So what I'm saying is you want to train the exercise you suck at instead of just saying, you know what, fuck it, I'm going to just do what I'm good at. Escape this mindset of, you know what, I'm going to do the flat bench. I'm just going to pause bench, practice competition movement for as long as I possibly can, and inevitably, Mother Nature will take care of me. My triceps are magically going to correct themselves without specialized work. Avoid that minimalist trap. Instead, avoid the variations that you're amazing at. Maybe you have good leverages. Ever thought about that? Maybe you have some muscle groups that are just taking over. So what you have to do is humble yourself, perform the exercise that you suck balls at. Maybe it's doing more deficit work on your pulls. Maybe it's doing some pause squats. Find the variations that challenge you mentally and physically. Get stronger at those, and you notice your lagging muscle groups starting to come up. And also, your competition exercise, wherever that may be, is going to raise like fucking crazy because you corrected the weak link. And the final thing I would tell you is to run a specialization system, either as a form of muscle priority, like some bodybuilders call it, or just ditching certain exercises altogether. Maybe you could change your routine completely. Maybe, for example, you could run an arm day once a week for a few months and see how that helps you out. Maybe you could drop flat benching for a couple months. Just do inclines and declines. Or if your overhead press is really sucky, just do OHP. Hell, maybe it's not the best move you could do in the long run. But if you really have a lagging area and you know for a fact that this is the problem and you've identified the compound movements that you truly suck at, then you go for it and you specialize 100%, that could be a good strategy. For example, on the overhead press using concurrent periodization, right? You could do your 1 rep max every single week on a different variation, right? So maybe overhead press with bands, maybe next week with chains, the week after that with pins, week after that just standard with a pause. You could do that, right? Then your secondary movement, instead of flat benching, you could do some incline pressing, which is very specific to the OHP. You really emphasize the movement patterns in these directions. And then you would change the specialty bars to raise the overhead press. Then guess what? You also have a volume day where you're doing a lot of rep work. Maybe you could do your waves 6x6, 8x10x10. But if you're doing that, you're not going to have a lot more room in to do some flat benching. You're going to be weaker on that. So what do? You hammer more volume on the vertical press. You do a shoulder press instead rather than, say, a flat dumbbell bench. Then the extensions will be done overhead, more specific. So that's what I'm trying to say. Sometimes you just got to go balls to the wall, full-on specialization, and say, you know what, fuck the balance, I don't care. If that becomes my new weakness, so be it. You can always work on it later. And the times where I did do this in my training, it's always been favorable, at least in the short term. Long term, like I said, there will be some negative consequences in the way that you're always catching up to some type of extent, right? But you know what? That's just strength training. That's how it works. You're always going to have some type of weakness that comes up. You're not going to be 100% balanced all the time. You're going to see some problems that need addressing. And it's not that you're weak, all right? Let's get that clear. It just means that proportionally, your performance is not on point compared to what it should be. We do have our flaws that need to be addressed. So those are really the main ways of dealing with it. I taught you how to identify what these problems were, then I gave you some nice solutions. So I hope it's been helpful, and if you want me to show you some special exercises for correcting certain weaknesses or give you some programming examples, let me know, because I can expand on this topic a lot more. There's so much more I could say. So this video was just a general introduction, giving you a nice little overview, if you will. So that's it, man. Give me your feedback down below if you have questions. Let's hear it. I'll talk to you next time.